All right, welcome to your deep dive. You ready to get into some Machiavelli?
I am. Always ready for some good old-fashioned political theory.
So today we're looking at excerpts from, of course, The Prince. I feel like everyone's heard of this book,
Oh, yeah.
but not that many people have actually read it.
Right.
And it's dense, right?
It is. It's very much of its time.
Yeah, so we're going to try to cut through some of that dense stuff and get to the I don't know, the really juicy part.
The core ideas.
Yeah, and some of the more shocking stuff too.
Oh, absolutely.
Because Machiavelli, he was not afraid to step on some toes.
Not at all. He was writing for, rulers and princes and people who were trying to gain power, and sometimes that means doing things that maybe aren't so nice.
So this is a book about power and leadership, how to get it, but more importantly, how to keep it.
Right.
That's kind of the big question.
Absolutely. That's the big through line. I mean, anyone can kind of stumble into a position of power, but staying there, that's the real challenge.
Yeah. So the thing about Machiavelli is that he's not just like some armchair philosopher, right?
Oh, no. This guy was in the thick of it.
Yeah. He worked for the Florentine Republic.
That's right.
So all kinds of crazy power struggles and betrayals and all that stuff.
Yeah, tons of backstabbing, double-crossing, you name it. That's what really informed his writing. He saw firsthand how nasty politics can be.
So this is all drawn from his experience.
Absolutely.
And he even he dedicates The Prince to Lorenzo de' Medici.
Right. Powerful ruler in Florence at the time.
Like he was saying, hey, Lorenzo, you want to stay on top? You got to read this.
Take notes.
So what's Machiavelli like? What kind of advice is he giving? I mean, he starts off by kind of breaking down different types of states.
Yeah, so he talks about hereditary states, mixed states, new principalities.
Even religious states.
Exactly. And each one comes with its own set of challenges when it comes to, acquiring and maintaining control.
It's fascinating how he sort of analyzes all this stuff. And one thing that really stood out to me is how he talks about conquering and holding on to states. For example, he argues that conquering a Turkish-style state, where it's all run by servants and administrators. He says that's actually harder to conquer initially.
Right, because there's not a clear power structure that you can just kind of topple.
Right. But then he says once you take over.
Much easier to hold on to.
Much easier to hold on to.
Just like cutting off the head of a snake, Once you've got that central power, the rest kind of just falls in line.
But then he contrasts that with, say, France, which is ruled by all these hereditary nobles, right?
Tons of them.
And he says that's actually easier to conquer because you can play those rivalries to your advantage.
Yeah, you just got to pit them against each other.
But then holding on to power.
Oh, way harder. Way harder.
Way harder because they could turn on you at any moment.
Exactly, yeah. That's why Machiavelli stresses the importance of, living in a newly acquired state yourself.
Right. Be there.
Being present, sending colonies,
yeah.
Really solidifying your presence. He even talks about strategically weakening powerful factions within that state.
It's all about minimizing those internal threats.
Right. Minimizing, neutralizing.
So you've conquered your territory.
Yeah.
You're in charge.
Right.
But Machiavelli, he goes deeper. He's like, hold on. How much of this is about skill and how much of it is about luck?
Yeah.
Right. He uses these two big concepts.
Virtu and fortuna.
Yeah. I love how he puts this together.
Yeah. It's he's saying, yeah, luck is a factor.
Of course.
But you can't just rely on luck, right?
Yeah.
You got to have the skills to capitalize on it when it comes your way.
And virtue isn't just being a good person.
No. It's much more than that.
It's about ability, strength, adaptability, being ruthless when you need to be.
Right. It's really about having the drive and the will to achieve your goals, whatever it takes.
Like that fire in your belly.
Exactly.
And then fortuna is that, the fate, the luck, the things you can't control.
Right. Like a global pandemic, maybe?
Oh, yeah. Nobody saw that coming.
Or the death of a key ally.
Right. Something that just throws everything off.
Right. Totally unpredictable circumstances.
So you might have all the virtue in the world, right? But then fortuna comes along and throws a wrench in everything.
And that's where the real challenge lies. How do you adapt? How do you overcome those unexpected obstacles? That's what Machiavelli wants us to grapple with.
So it's about balancing those two.
It is, yeah.
You got to have the skills, but you also have to be able to roll with the punches.
Exactly. Because fortune can give you an opening, but it's virtue that lets you seize that opportunity.
And Machiavelli believes in this so strongly, he uses this guy. Caesar Borgia is an example.
Yes, Caesar Borgia, the Duke Valentino.
No, I've heard that name.
Oh, yeah.
But fill me in. Like, who is this guy?
So Caesar Borgia was a bit of a controversial figure. His father was Pope Alexander VI, so he had some serious connections.
Okay, so he starts off with a pretty big advantage.
Oh, absolutely. Born into power. But what Machiavelli found so fascinating about Borgia was what he did with that power.
So it's not just about who your dad is.
Right.
It's what you do with it.
Yeah, you got to have the skills to back it up. And Borgia, he had virtù in spades.
Okay, but what did he actually do?
Well, he was determined to solidify his power in a region of Italy called Romagna.
Okay, and this is where things get a little dicey, right? Because I know Borgia was known for being pretty ruthless.
Ruthless is putting it mildly. He was up against powerful families like the Orsini and Vitelli, who posed a serious threat to his rule.
So what did he do? Just like have them over for dinner and slip something in their wine?
He was a bit more direct than that. We're talking strategic takedowns, imprisonments, even public execution.
Like a full-on Game of Thrones situation.
Yeah, pretty much. He even had one of his own enforcers, Romero d'Orco, publicly executed to establish his authority.
Whoa, that's cold. Like using your own guy as a pawn to send a message.
Exactly. It was brutal, but Machiavelli saw it as a calculated move to instill both fear and respect.
So it's that whole idea that it's better to be feared than loved.
Well, we'll get into that more in a bit.
Okay, but did it work? Did Borgia's, let's call it aggressive management style, did it actually pay off in the end?
In the short term, it seemed to. Romagna was brought under control. There was a period of stability. But then fortune, as it always does, threw a curveball.
Oh no, what happened?
His dad, the Pope, died.
So he lost his main backer.
Exactly. His enemies saw an opportunity, they pounced, and Borgia's power crumbled.
So even with all that virtue, all that skill and ruthlessness, he couldn't overcome a sudden shift in fortune.
Nope. It's a harsh reminder that even the best-laid plans can be completely upended when circumstances change.
It's like that saying, man plans, God laughs.
Right. Or in Machiavelli's terms, Fortuna laughs.
Yeah, it makes you realize you can't control everything.
Right.
But, you know, one thing that's always kind of freaked people out about Machiavelli is his take on, like, cruelty versus mercy.
Oh, yeah.
Like, is he really saying it's better to be feared than loved?
I mean, that's the line everybody remembers, right?
Right.
But it's a little more complicated than that.
Yeah.
Obviously, he's dealing with some pretty extreme situations here.
Right.
So he's saying a prince, a ruler, they should want to be seen as merciful, of course.
Right.
But they can't let that stop them from using cruelty when it's necessary.
It's like choosing the lesser of two evils.
Exactly. You got to do what you got to do to maintain control.
Right. And I guess sometimes, you know, you have to make those tough calls.
Absolutely.
That might not be popular.
Mm-hmm.
Would Machiavelli say, like, that sometimes that show of force, even if it's cruel, could actually prevent more suffering in the long run?
I think you might.
Yeah.
You know, think about Borgia. That whole thing with Romero d'Orco.
Right.
Brutal, yeah, but it brought stability to Romagna, at least for a while.
Right.
And Machiavelli's argument is, you know, what's better? A little bit of cruelty up front or like chaos and suffering for everyone later on?
That's a tough question.
Yeah, it's a tough question.
Yeah, it's like, it's really making me think about all those leaders throughout history who've had to, like, make those really difficult choices.
Oh, absolutely.
But, okay, so if love is, like, so fickle,
Mm-hmm.
is fear really the only way to make sure people are going to follow you?
Well, Machiavelli believes love is, yeah, it's fleeting.
Yeah.
It's easily broken.
Right.
Circumstances change. People feel offended, whatever.
Right.
Fear, though, fear is primal. It keeps people in line.
Yeah.
But he's not just saying, be a tyrant, you know?
Right.
There's more to it than that.
Okay, so, like, what's the key to, like, wielding that fear effectively?
He uses this great analogy. He says, a prince, a leader, they got to be like a fox and a lion.
Oh, I like that.
Right. So the fox, cunning, adaptable, outsmarting everyone.
Right.
And the lion, that's the raw power.
The force.
Right. So you got to know when to be sneaky and when to just like roar.
But how do you balance those two things? Like, can you really be both at the same time?
That's the challenge. That's the tightrope walk of leadership. And it kind of leads into another one of Machiavelli's controversial points. He says that sometimes a prince can't keep his word.
Oh, so is this like the ends justify the means kind of thing.
Well, he wouldn't necessarily put it that way.
Yeah.
But he's writing from this perspective where, political survival is at stake.
It's a different world.
Yeah. So he's saying, look, in the real world, people are going to scheme, they're going to lie, they're going to break promises. If you're too rigid, too idealistic, you're going to get crushed.
So it's like, it's not about being a bad guy. It's just about being realistic.
Exactly.
Okay, but doesn't that make you a hypocrite?
I mean, that's a valid concern. But Machiavelli would say it's all about strategy. It's about perception. You got to keep up appearances even if you're doing things behind the scenes that are, maybe not so virtuous.
But isn't there a risk that, like, eventually people are going to see through that?
Sure, there's always a risk.
Yeah.
But wouldn't you rather be the cunning fox who can adapt and outmaneuver everyone
Okay, yeah.
than the naive little lamb who gets eaten alive?
Makes sense.
He actually uses Pope Alexander VI, Borgia's dad, as an example of someone who was like a master of this. Super manipulative, always thinking 10 steps ahead.
Wow, so like a cunning fox in papal robes.
Pretty much. But being a fox isn't enough.
Right.
Machiavelli also warns against, going too far with the whole deception thing.
Okay, how so?
You can't just lie and cheat your way to the top and expect to stay there. You can't become so hated that everyone turns against you.
So there's a limit, like even for Machiavelli.
Even for Machiavelli, he stresses that a prince, while being, ruthless when necessary, should never become despised by his people.
So how do you walk that line? I mean, how do you stay in power without making everyone hate you?
Well, part of it is understanding people.
Okay, yeah.
Knowing what motivates them, what their weaknesses are, how they respond to different types of power.
It's like psychology meets politics.
Exactly. Machiavelli was a keen observer of human nature, and he believed a wise prince would use that knowledge to their advantage.
So, like, figuring out how to play on people's hopes and fears?
Absolutely. Knowing when to inspire loyalty, when to crack down, it's a delicate balance.
It's like you're playing this giant game of chess, but with real people.
And the stakes are incredibly high.
Yeah, no kidding. But if Machiavelli is saying you can't just rule through fear, what's the alternative?
Well, this is where it gets interesting. He actually says a prince should focus on protecting his subjects' property and their honor.
Really?
Yeah.
I wouldn't have expected that from him.
It seems counterintuitive, right?
Yeah, I mean, he's all about being ruthless and cunning, but then he's saying you need to be fair to the people.
It's all about maintaining that balance. You can be tough on your rivals, but you need to show the everyday people that you're just and that you're looking out for them.
So it's like building a sense of security and trust.
Exactly. And this ties into another one of his key ideas, the importance of a strong citizen army.
Oh, yeah. He really rails against mercenaries, doesn't he?
Big time. He actually compares relying on mercenaries to what happened with the Roman Empire and the Goths.
Right, the mercenaries who eventually helped bring down the whole empire.
Exactly. He's saying these outside forces, they're unreliable.
Yeah, they're only loyal to whoever's paying them the most.
Right. They have their own agendas, and they might turn on you in a heartbeat if the price is right.
That's a scary thought. So what's the alternative? How do you build a strong, reliable army without relying on these fickle mercenaries?
Machiavelli's answer is simple. A citizen army. An army made up of your own people.
People who are fighting for their homes, their families, their country.
Exactly. They have a stake in the outcome. They're not just in it for the money.
So you need to cultivate loyalty among your people, not just buy it from outsiders.
That's the idea. It's about shared purpose, shared destiny.
But how do you create that kind of loyalty? How do you inspire people to fight for you, to believe in what you're doing?
Well, according to Machiavelli, there's one thing a prince should be focused on above all else.
Let me guess. War.
You got it. Or, more specifically, preparation for war.
Wait, shouldn't a good leader be trying to avoid war? Isn't peace the ultimate goal?
Sure, peace is great, but Machiavelli's take is you can't just sit around and hope for the best. You got to be ready for anything.
So it's like that old saying, hope for the best, prepare for the worst.
Exactly. Always be one step ahead. Anticipate threats. Be ready to act decisively when the moment comes.
That's a pretty intense way to live.
It is.
Always thinking about the next battle.
But that's the Machiavellian mindset. And it's not just about having a strong army. It's about cultivating the right qualities in a leader.
I mean, it's like all this stuff about being a cunning fox and embracing deception and stuff. It's kind of a lot.
Yeah, it does kind of make you wonder, is this really how we want our leaders to behave?
Right, right. Is this something to aspire to?
Well, I think that's what makes The Prince so interesting. It really challenges us to think about the nature of power
Yeah.
and the difficult choices that leaders have to make. It's not like a feel-good, self-help book.
Right.
He's really forcing us to confront some uncomfortable truths.
Yeah, and that tension between like the ideal and the reality is what I think makes this book still so relevant. Like it's not just a how-to guide for tyrants.
Right.
It's like it's a deeper exploration of like the dynamics of power and like the warnings about, the compromises that you might have to make along the way.
Absolutely. I mean, you have to remember the context here. Machiavelli's writing this in a time when Italy was really, fragmented and vulnerable. There were all these powerful foreign forces kind of circling.
Yeah.
And so he's really trying to analyze how power works in a world that is, messy and dangerous.
Right. It's not a perfect world.
Yeah, at all.
And it's in that last chapter where it's like Machiavelli, he gets fired up. Like he's basically saying, hey, Italy, you need a leader. Like you need a strong leader who gets it, who understands how power really works.
Yeah, it's like a call to action.
Yeah.
He's saying, you're surrounded by enemies, you're divided internally. You need somebody who can unite the country and protect it from these threats.
And he points to these figures from history, like Moses, Cyrus, Theseus.
Yeah. Leaders who emerged during these like really turbulent times.
Right.
And they weren't afraid to, break the mold, challenge the status quo, do whatever it took to get things done.
So it's about more than just like, military strength.
Oh, absolutely.
It's about having a vision. It's about inspiring people.
Right.
Uniting them behind a common goal, like a real leader.
Right. It's about, transcending your own individual interests and working for something bigger.
But like, how does this apply to us? We're not living in Renaissance Italy.
Right.
Like we're not surrounded by warring city-states and scheming nobles and all that stuff. So does Machiavelli really have anything to teach us today?
I think he does. I mean, if you look at the core principles he's talking about, strategic thinking, decisiveness, understanding human nature, inspiring others. I mean, these are timeless qualities.
Yeah.
Whether you're leading a team at work or running a business or even just, trying to navigate your own personal relationships.
So it's not about being Machiavellian in that like, that negative sense.
Right.
It's about understanding how power works and using it effectively to achieve your goals.
Exactly. And remembering that the world is a complex place.
Yeah.
You have to be adaptable. You have to be willing to make tough decisions. You can't get stuck in rigid ideologies or ways of thinking.
So like finding that balance between being idealistic and being pragmatic. Like we all have our values, but you also have to deal with reality.
Absolutely. And I think, at the end of the day, that's really what Machiavelli is trying to get us to think about. What kind of leader do you want to be?
Yeah.
What kind of world do you want to create?
So as we kind of, wrap up our deep dive into The Prince, I guess the question is, what kind of leader do you think the world needs today? What are those essential qualities for navigating all the craziness of the 21st century? Let us know what you think, and thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.